Welcome to The Explainer. We tend to think of schizophrenia as this sudden, dramatic break from reality. But what if that's completely wrong? What if it's actually the final chapter of a story that begins long, long before birth? Well, today we're going to play detective and trace the clues of this complex condition right from the very start. Okay, so here's how we're going to crack this case. First, we'll set up our detective framework. Then, we're going to hunt for clues before birth, through childhood, and right at that critical tipping point. And finally, we'll zoom out to see the whole life story, piecing it all together. All right, let's get into it. The old way of looking at schizophrenia was to just focus on the crisis, the final scene. But if we really want to solve this mystery, we have to go all the way back to the beginning and ask a much, much deeper question. Now, this one question is a total game changer. It forces us to see schizophrenia not as some random event, but as the culmination of a lifelong journey. We're literally rewinding the tape on a person's life, trying to hear the faint whispers of what's to come, sometimes decades before the illness ever shows up. And the main tool in our forensic kit for this investigation? It's a field called developmental epidemiology. It's basically the science of how the earliest chapters of our lives, our genes, our environment, end up writing the story of our long-term health. So this timeline, this is our roadmap. We're starting our investigation at the very earliest stages of life and following that trail through every key developmental milestone, right up to the exact moment the illness first makes its appearance. And our investigation begins right here, in the quiet, formative world of the womb, where the very first clues about our future health are being written directly into our biology. Think about it like this. Our genes are the script, but the environment is the director. And even before we're born, that director is already making changes, turning some genes on and others off. Scientists call this programming, and believe me, it can have a lifelong impact. So what kind of clues are we looking for in this early stage? Well, researchers have found that it's often a combination of genetic vulnerability and environmental stuff. Things like complications during the pregnancy or even the birth itself that can increase the risk down the road. Okay, so now our investigation moves into childhood, and this is where the clues get a lot harder to spot. We're not looking for signs of an illness just yet. We're looking for these really subtle deviations from the typical developmental path. So how on earth do we find these tiny clues? The answer is through these incredible scientific projects called birth cohort studies. Just imagine following thousands and thousands of people from the moment they are born and tracking their entire development for decades. That's how we get this priceless data. And what do these amazing studies show us? Well, in some people who later develop schizophrenia, researchers have found these subtle childhood differences in things like motor skills, thinking, and social interactions. And I have to say it again, these are not signs of illness, just small variations in development. Now we've reached the tipping point. Adolescence and early adulthood. This is where those subtle vulnerabilities that we've been tracking can start to snowball and potentially lead to the very first signs of the illness. This whole lead-up period is known as the prodrome, and it's a real gray area. The changes are subtle, they're often confusing, and that makes it incredibly difficult for scientists to know exactly when the prodrome ends and the illness actually begins. And because that prodrome period is so hard to define, the first episode of the illness itself offers this rare and incredibly powerful opportunity for scientists. It's a chance to study the condition at the very moment it truly appears. So the crucial point is this. Studying people right at this moment lets researchers see the illness in its purest form. They can gather information before the whole picture gets complicated by the effects of long-term illness or medication. It's like a totally unfiltered look at the biology of onset. These first episode studies are an absolute goldmine of information. They give us a perfect snapshot of the brain at the moment of onset, and they help us understand how all those earlier risk factors we've been tracking finally come together at this critical tipping point. But hold on, the story isn't over yet. To really, truly understand schizophrenia, we have to zoom out and look at the entire lifespan, because this is a story that absolutely keeps on unfolding. And this illustrates that point perfectly. While we often think of schizophrenia appearing in young adulthood, get this, it can also show up at the other extreme of life, in old age. This very late onset form has different characteristics, different potential risk factors, which just reinforces the idea that this is a condition with a story that can span an entire lifetime. So after all our detective work, what have we learned? The big takeaway is this. Schizophrenia isn't some sudden storm that comes out of nowhere. It's more like a slow-building weather pattern. It's the end result of a long, complex journey, with clues scattered all throughout a person's life. And this is really where our investigation leads us, to a place of hope. I mean, think about it. If schizophrenia is a story with such a long beginning, could we actually change the ending? This new perspective shifts the focus from just treating the illness to one day, maybe preventing it altogether.